Welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about our grading system for this course, which is a little bit different than what you're probably used to. Let's begin with a story. Suppose that there are two students in the same class, and they have the following scores on 4 cumulative exams. Exams 1, 2, and 3, and then the final exam. You can also see at the far right, the average of the 4 exams is given. So I encourage you to maybe pause the video and then think about what you see before we move on. I'll give you a few seconds. Here is a different view of the same exam scores. Student A is in red. You can see student A started very strong with a high score in exam 1, then came down and then continued to go down until they basically failed the final exam. Student B, on the other hand, started off very slowly, but over time continually improved their scores on exams 2, 3, and 4, finishing with a very strong final exam score. The green line just indicates the average so that you can compare them. So who really learned here? Both of these students end up with the same exact average. So should they get the same grade? Did they learn the same amount? Does that grade reflect their learning or their improvement over time? Clearly, there are issues with this particular situation. Most people would probably agree there's something wrong with the fact that both of these students would get the exact same grade given their progress or lack of progress over time. So in this course, we're going to use an alternative grading system. In education, it's sometimes called a mastery-based system. We're going to replace that with the phrase proficiency-based. And so what we'll find in this course is that your grade is based ultimately on how you perform on the learning outcomes for the course. The course is designed so that you are able to improve or revise your work for passing scores or to show proficiency over time, within some reason, of course. We are restricted to 10 weeks, and we do need to keep on pace, but you will have time and opportunities to improve and revise as long as you stay mostly up to speed with the pace of the course. In this system, lower scores early in the process of your learning don't have to hurt your grade if you can show proficiency in a later attempt on a particular task or assignment. So in this particular course, we will have 14 learning outcomes. They're called LO1 through LO14. Each learning outcome will have a set of readings and homework, a quiz, and a learning check. Think of the readings and the homework as sort of replacing the lecture in a face-to-face class. They basically prepare you for the measures of your proficiency, which start at the quiz. The quiz is basically problems taken directly from the homework. And so if you have worked through the homework and regenerated problems, you should be able to complete the quiz with a score of 3 or higher, which gives you a check for proficiency on that quiz. Once you pass the quiz, then you can move to what we call a learning check. A learning check is similar to a quiz, except you have a little less time to complete it. Some of the questions may look a little bit different, and some of the questions may actually be a little more challenging than what you saw on the quiz or the homework. Basically, the quiz and the learning check are your first 2 opportunities to show proficiency. The quiz is sort of an entry level. The learning check is a more advanced level. Some of the learning outcomes will also have a writing check, where you have to write up the solution to a problem, submit it, and the instructor will grade that. In all of these assignments, you basically either get proficiency credit or you do not. We'll talk about that a little bit more. But we won't be worrying about partial credit or accumulating points in this class. When you do these particular assignments, you will need to do them in order because they're designed in a particular way. The readings and homework come first, then your first or easier proficiency check, which is the quiz. Your next one is the learning check, and then finally you would do the writing check if there is one. Once you have finished and checked off proficiency for all of these assignments, then you would move or start the next learning outcome. And you begin the process all over again with a new set of readings, a new quiz, and so on. And that's the process for this particular course. Your goal is, again, to show proficiency on all of the learning outcomes in the course across multiple assignments and across time. If you do that, you're going to succeed in this course and you will pass. How you show proficiency on any quiz, learning check, or writing check is by obtaining a score of 3 or higher on the assignment. Now, these are not traditional points, really, but they do indicate whether or not you have demonstrated proficiency or not. So as I said before, there's no partial credit or haggling over how many points were assigned on a particular quiz or exam or anything like that. You're either proficient on the task at hand or not. However, when you do show proficiency for a particular assignment or task, you'll get to move on to the next assignment or the next task. Now, of course, sometimes you may not be able to show proficiency on your first attempt. In the quizzes, you'll have 2 automatic attempts without any restriction. As long as you do them by the deadline, you can do every quiz 2 times. The same is true for a learning check. For a writing check, you have 1 attempt. If you cannot show proficiency on any of those assignments with the attempts that are given to you by default, what happens next? Well, as I said earlier, if you don't pass a quiz, a learning check, or a writing check and show proficiency, then you're going to have more opportunities, within reason, to redo an assignment so that you can show proficiency eventually. So you'll be able to request to try another quiz or another learning check or whatever it may be, so you can request another attempt at one of these assignments. There will be some limits to how many times you can do this and how long into the future those extra attempts may go. You may have to use what are called tokens for some of these requests, actually for most of them. So we'll talk about tokens a little bit later. And there may be some other requirements that may apply depending on situations. I may ask to meet with you briefly in an office hour or on a Zoom call or something like that. But what's important here is that if you engage with this overall process, you can continue to work until you pass each assignment and show proficiency on it. So just because you fail or mess up early on doesn't mean it's going to ruin your grade later. I mentioned in the last slide this idea of tokens. These are like sort of free passes or get out of jail cards that allow you to do things like request extensions when you don't meet a due date, or request an extra attempt on an assignment beyond the normal number of attempts that are allowed on that assignment. Some important points regarding tokens: you're going to have about 10 for the quarter. The final number will be in the syllabus, but generally it'll be about 10. That's roughly 1 per week. But keep in mind that once they're gone, they're gone. So you need to use them wisely. The way you can avoid running out of tokens is by staying on track and making sure you get your assignments done on time and that you show proficiency on time. But we do have about 10 tokens for the quarter for those situations where you run into some challenges. One other thing to notice is that at about the halfway point in the quarter, you're only going to be allowed to use 2 per week. And that's just because there will be more and more of these requests at the end of the quarter, and so we want to avoid too much procrastination, and we also want to allow the instructor to be able to process all of these and regrade many of these assignments at the end of the quarter without interfering with their ability to support all students in the course. Eventually, you're going to have access to an online tracker that will help you get the grade in the course that you want. So you will be checking off all of the assignments where you show mastery. It's going to total up those proficiency marks for you and then give you an estimate of what your grade could be or what it would be if you do certain things. The basic idea is the more checks that you create or can check off, the more assignments you can check off, the higher your grade is going to be. And we're not going to go into the details of the grading in this particular video. I'm just going to leave it at that. Let me talk really briefly about some of the benefits of this system before we end the video. Number one, this system emphasizes learning and growth over the entire quarter so that early mistakes or missteps don't have to have a major negative impact on your final course grade. So if you start off slowly, you can still recover if you catch up and continue to show proficiency. This system will focus coursework and what you do in the course toward whether or not your efforts actually do show proficiency of the learning outcomes in the course, which is important. If you haven't learned the outcomes in the course, then you really haven't succeeded in the course. It's going to allow me as the instructor to focus on your success and your learning rather than just figuring out how many points to give you on a quiz or an exam question or how much partial credit to give. It'll simplify this process for both of us in a very nice way. It's going to help you produce higher quality work because on some of these assignments, you either show proficiency or you don't. So producing low quality work and producing stuff that barely gets by isn't going to cut it, and therefore it's going to encourage you to work harder to actually show that you know the material. Another really important one here is it places control of your grade in your hands fully, so you don't have to hope for a grade. You'll know exactly where you are at all times, and you'll know what you need to do to get your grade to increase. Also, this system is going to make clear exactly how many of each kind of assessment you will need to do well on in order to get the grade you want. The tracker is going to do that for you very nicely. This system is also going to directly link the grade that you earn in the course to the amount and the quality of work you do. So if you do the right amount of work and it's of the higher quality that shows proficiency, you will get a passing grade. And finally, it leads to a final grade in the end that does really reflect what you've learned. What is your real proficiency in this course? And that's going to counter that story that we saw early in the video where you have somebody who may have started strong but then just continued to do more and more poorly throughout the quarter. That person probably has not shown that they have learned the material in the course. But the other student who continued to get better and continued to show that they had learned the material will get a grade that reflects that work and that proficiency. This system's going to take some time for all of us to get used to. It's relatively new to me, so I ask that you give it some time. When I need to, I'll make adjustments and I'll fix mistakes. But please, I do request that if you have questions, you ask them early, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. Please remember that I have adopted this system to make grading more clear, more equitable, more flexible, and more focused on the actual learning process rather than just how many points you earn in the course. My goal is to help you to learn and to succeed, and that's why I've adopted this particular system. I hope that you find this system to be beneficial to you. Again, if you have questions, please ask them and I will answer them as soon as I can. That's the end of the video.